Is that okay? And the answer is yes. Failing the horizontal line test would only entail intersecting at more than 1 point. If it intersects at 1 or 0 points, that's still fine because it's not taking one input to more than one output. Or in this case, not having an output given by more than one input. Here we see that there's no inputs that give an output, but that's fine because it's not more than 1, it's 0. So this thing is in fact 1-to-1, and so it is in fact invertible. This function was created in Desmos, and I had to use the piecewise operator to sort of define this part and this part separately so that I could get a gap in between them. And so this function is actually a piecewise function, but as we will see probably later, finding the inverse of a piecewise function is the same as finding the inverses of its pieces. So that even though this looks like it's more complicated, it still satisfies everything we need it to be 1-to-1, and so it is still invertible. The last thing I'm going to use in this lecture is just listing a couple of properties of inverses. So we already know that f of x and its inverse are symmetric about y equals x. It's a very noisy board. We know that, so another thing that is true about inverses is since it reverses what a given function does, if we have the inverse of the output of a function, right? So f to the negative 1 is the inverse of f, and we are taking f of x, which is itself the output of f. Since this is the output of f, and we're plugging it as the input for the inverse, we should get out the input. Let me say that again more carefully. So f takes inputs to outputs. And in this example, it takes x to f of x, right? We don't know what f is, so we just leave its output in terms of f of x. And f prime takes outputs to inputs. So it takes f of x and outputs x. I have my phone. And so when we look at this structure here, we're effectively saying f inverse takes the output of f, and what does it do with it? Well, it gives us the input, right? So anytime you have... Okay. Hi, can I call you right back? Yes. Sorry. So anytime you have the inverse of a function of x, it's just going to output x. And another way to think about that is this does something to x, and this undoes that exact same thing to x. So the composition of these two should be just x. Another property that they have is inverses. I guess I'll bullet point these. Inverses are unique, meaning that for every function there is only ever going to be one inverse function, and for every inverse function there's only one function that's the inverse of. Another thing is the domain of f inverse is the range of f, and the other way, the range of f inverse is the domain of f, right? Because they sort of flip which one we're considering inputs and outputs. Another one which is highly related to this one, so I'll just put it up here, is f of f inverse of y should be y for exactly the same reason. So this one is f inverse of something, and this one is f of its inverse. So they say nearly the same thing, but they're going in opposite directions. But the same result applies. And the last one that we probably need is to say that just sort of by definition, the way we look at these things, if f of x equals y, then f inverse of y equals x, right? And again, this is by this idea of reversing an operation or undoing something. If this function converts x into y, well, then its inverse has to convert y back into x. And that is, yeah, so if f of x equals x, so it does nothing to it, then f of x equals f inverse of x, because we can just sort of apply this to either of these and we get that they equal the same thing. So that was sort of a super brief rundown of the first 4.5 pages of the notes, which again are still up on Blackboard and they're still written to be read rather than lectured from. So highly encourage people to still go there first and then sort of use these lectures as a supplement for that. That's where I'm going to end it today, but like with the glare situation going on over here and here, if people have suggestions or complaints or comments about this setup, I know it's really janky, it's super improvised. I'm stranded in Connecticut because of the pandemic and I have very little supplies. So let me know exactly what you think is good, should be changed, is bad, whatever. And please do that on Campus Wire so that everyone can sort of pitch into the same conversation. That goes in general. If you have questions that you sort of want to ask me because we aren't doing this live anymore, please post them through Campus Wire, and please do so publicly instead of privately so that everyone can benefit from the same answers if they have the same questions. So yeah, I think that's it.